The scream tore through the restaurant like a gunshot. A small body collapsed from the chair, plates shattered on the marble floor, and for a moment, time didn't exist. "Ethan," his father shouted, dropping to his knees, lifting his son with trembling hands. "Ethan, wake up." No answer, only the murmur of gasps, the shuffle of frightened feet, and the cold awareness that something in that room had gone horribly wrong. Across the table she stood, Vanessa Hale, his fiancée. Her hands trembled not from shock, but from something darker. Her eyes, once warm and inviting, were sharp now, calculated, silent but terrifying. Before the scream, before the panic, before the hospital lights, Daniel Rowe's life had seemed perfect to the outside world. By 42, he had built one of the fastest-growing logistics companies in southern Africa. His name carried weight from Johannesburg to Nairobi. Newspapers loved his story, self-made, disciplined, quietly powerful. But at home, Daniel wasn't a millionaire. He was just a father. Every morning, he woke before the sun, not for meetings, but because Ethan liked his eggs soft, never dry. He tied his son's school tie himself, even when assistants waited outside with schedules and reminders. "You don't have to do everything alone, Dad," Ethan had said once, his small voice serious beyond his years. Daniel had smiled, though the memory tightened his chest. Once he hadn't been alone. Once, his wife Rachel had been the calm in his restless ambition. She had believed in him when his business was nothing more than a borrowed truck and unpaid fuel bills. She laughed easily, she loved deeply, and one rainy night, 5 years earlier, she hadn't come home. The accident was sudden, brutal, a drunk driver. One phone call that split Daniel's life into before and after. After the funeral, Daniel discovered how loud silence could be. Ethan was only 2 then, too young to understand death, but old enough to feel absence. He cried for his mother in his sleep for months. Daniel would sit on the edge of the crib, holding that small, trembling body, whispering promises he wasn't sure he could keep. "I'm here, I won't leave you," he whispered, and he didn't, not for a second. From that moment on, everything Daniel did revolved around his son. Love, protection, control, maybe too much. People noticed at family gatherings. Whispers followed him. A man like Daniel shouldn't be alone forever. A boy needs a mother. Even his mother, gentle but firm, spoke carefully one evening over tea. Grief should not turn into a prison. Daniel said nothing. He stared at his hands instead. He wasn't against love. He just didn't trust it anymore. Then came Vanessa Hale. They met at a charity gala, the kind Daniel attended out of obligation, not interest. Vanessa was elegant without effort. She spoke intelligently about business, but also books, travel, faith. Most importantly, she listened. When Daniel mentioned Ethan, her eyes softened. "I adore children," she said gently. "They're honest, they don't pretend." Her words had a weight Daniel hadn't realized he'd been missing. Their relationship moved slowly at first. Dinners, long conversations, careful steps. Vanessa never demanded immediate access to Ethan. She waited. That patience impressed Daniel. When Ethan finally met her, Daniel watched carefully. Vanessa knelt to Ethan's height, smiling. "Your dad talks about you all the time," she said. Ethan smiled politely. He was a quiet child, observant. He studied her face longer than most children would. "You smell nice," he said honestly. Vanessa laughed. Daniel relaxed. For a while, everything seemed perfect. Vanessa spent more time at the house, helped with homework, cooked under supervision, bought thoughtful gifts. In front of Daniel, she was affectionate, encouraging. But children notice things adults ignore. Ethan noticed how Vanessa's smile faded the second Daniel left the room, how her voice sharpened when Daniel cancelled plans for school events, how she corrected him quickly but rarely praised him. Once, when Daniel wasn't around, Vanessa sighed almost to herself. "You're very attached to your father," she said. Ethan didn't understand why that made his stomach hurt, only that it did. One night Ethan asked, "Dad, does Vanessa like me?" Daniel froze. "Why would you ask that?" I don't know, Ethan shrugged. She just looks sad sometimes when you play with me. Daniel forced a smile, brushed his son's hair. She's just adjusting, he said. Adults need time. But doubt had already entered the room, and Daniel pushed it aside. He wanted this to work for Ethan, for himself, for the life he wanted to seem whole again. When Daniel proposed, he did it privately. No cameras, no grand speeches. Vanessa cried, said yes. Ethan clapped politely when he heard the news, but that night, alone in his bed, he hugged his pillow tighter than usual. After the engagement, Vanessa's involvement increased. She insisted on joining breakfast every morning. You shouldn't rush off without eating, she told Daniel one morning. Ethan needs to see us as a family. Ethan sat quietly, swinging his legs beneath the chair. Vanessa corrected the way he held his spoon, the way he sat, the way he spoke. Say please properly, Ethan. Sit up straight. Don't interrupt adults. It didn't sound cruel, but it didn't sound kind either. Daniel noticed once or twice, but dismissed it. Discipline was normal, he told himself, maybe even good. What Daniel didn't see were the moments when he wasn't around. The way Vanessa's smile vanished the second he left the room. How her eyes followed Ethan, not warmly, but like she was watching a rival. One afternoon, Ethan came home early from school with a mild fever. Daniel was stuck in traffic. Vanessa, please stay with him, he said. Of course, she replied smoothly. When he arrived, Ethan was asleep on the couch, blanket tucked neatly. Vanessa sat nearby, scrolling on her phone. He didn't eat much, she said casually. I think he exaggerates sometimes. Daniel frowned slightly, but said nothing. He kissed his son's forehead and carried him upstairs. That night, Ethan stood hesitantly at Daniel's study door. Dad. Daniel looked up immediately. What's wrong, son? Ethan twisted the hem of his pajama shirt, eyes fixed on the floor. Vanessa said, I should stop pretending to be sick, that you have important work. Daniel's chest tightened. He forced a smile. She's just adjusting, he whispered to himself. But something inside him refused to believe that. And that's where everything began to unravel. The restaurant was buzzing with quiet chatter, clinking glasses, and soft music. Daniel had chosen it carefully, somewhere elegant, private enough for a small celebration, but open enough for Ethan to feel like part of the world. Vanessa held his hand lightly, her smile just shy of warmth. It's going to be perfect, she said. Daniel tried to believe her. He wanted to. He had to. Ethan sat quietly in his chair, swinging his legs, eyes wide but curious. He was polite, observant, the way he always was. Daniel smiled at him, ruffling his hair. You excited for dinner, buddy? Ethan nodded. Yes, Dad. The first course arrived, lightly seared fish with steamed vegetables. The plates gleamed under the restaurant lights. Everything looked ordinary, safe, beautiful. Daniel leaned back, sipping his wine, trying to relax. Vanessa said something about the menu, then excused herself to the restroom. That's when it happened. Ethan's small body jerked violently, his fork fell, a plate tipped, glasses shattered on the floor. Ethan, Daniel shouted, rising instantly. His hands shook as he lifted his son into his arms. His eyes scanned the room in panic, looking for anyone, anything that could explain what had just happened. Ethan's lips were pale, his eyes rolled back, his small body shook uncontrollably. The words came from across the room, cutting through the chaos. Your fiancé put something in his food, a waitress screamed. Time froze. Daniel's heart slammed against his chest. He looked at Vanessa, standing by the table now, her hands trembling, her face perfectly controlled, almost too calm. Vanessa, what? He began, his voice trembling, but she didn't answer. Ethan's small body convulsed again. Daniel had never felt fear like this before, not when Rachel had died, not in business crises, not ever. Nothing had prepared him for this. The staff rushed in. Someone called 911. Another grabbed towels to clean the mess of broken plates and food. People stepped back, whispering, some crying, some frozen in shock. Daniel held his son tightly, his own tears threatening to fall. He repeated his name over and over. "Ethan, stay with me. I'm right here, buddy, look at me." His voice broke. His son, usually so strong for his age, was helpless in his arms. And Daniel realized all the discipline, all the careful planning, all the love he had poured into Ethan had almost failed to protect him. Vanessa stepped closer, but not to help. She looked at him, her eyes sharp, calculating, and in that instant, Daniel understood the truth he had ignored. She had been waiting. Not for him, for his son. Paramedics arrived. They lifted Ethan from Daniel's arms carefully, checking his pulse, placing him on a stretcher. Daniel followed, clutching his son's hand. His mind raced, every scenario worse than the last. At the hospital, doctors rushed Ethan inside. Daniel stayed close, answering questions, packing the hallway. Vanessa followed slowly, her posture careful, as if she were a concerned fiancée. Daniel's instincts screamed at him. Something was wrong. He had to know. A nurse pulled him aside. "Sir, we found traces of something in his meal. It's being analyzed." Daniel's stomach dropped. He looked at Vanessa. She smiled faintly, then turned her face away, pretending to check her phone. Hours passed. Ethan lay in a hospital bed, stable but sedated, hooked to monitors. Daniel sat by his side, holding his hand. The world outside was irrelevant. Money, work, fame, none of it mattered now. All that mattered was the child he had sworn to protect. He couldn't speak, couldn't even think clearly, but one thing burned inside him: betrayal. Vanessa's betrayal. Everything in their relationship suddenly made sense. The sharp tone, the lack of praise, the sighs when he hugged Ethan, the casual corrections. It had never been about parenting. It had been about control. Daniel's mind flashed back to smaller incidents he had dismissed. Ethan's mild fever at home. When she told him, he exaggerated. The way she had sided him for being too attached. The moments she seemed to vanish the second he left the room. It was all deliberate, and now it had nearly cost him his son's life. Daniel made a decision. He couldn't wait for police. He couldn't risk Vanessa walking away. He had to act. He confronted her outside the ICU room. "Vanessa, what did you do?" His voice was quiet but deadly. She looked at him, her eyes hardening. "I didn't mean to, not really." Daniel's laugh was hollow. "Not really, you tried to hurt my son." Her composure slipped for the first time. "He's yours, always has been. I just wanted to be in control. I wanted respect. I wanted to know he couldn't choose anyone over me." Daniel felt his hands clench. "You risked his life. My child, your child, is not yours." Her face twisted, and then she stepped back, as if realizing the gravity of her actions. At that moment, security arrived. Vanessa was restrained. Police had been called. Statements were taken, and Daniel finally allowed himself to breathe. Hours later, Ethan woke, weak, scared, but alive. Daniel held him, tears falling freely now. "I'm here, buddy. I'm not leaving. Ever," he whispered, his lips brushing Ethan's hair. Ethan clung to him, small arms wrapping tightly around Daniel's neck. "I'm scared, Dad," he whispered. "I know, buddy, but you're safe. I promise," Daniel said. It was the first real smile Ethan had given in days, a flicker of relief. The aftermath was chaotic. Vanessa was arrested and charged with attempted poisoning and child endangerment. Daniel gave statements, testified, ensured she could never approach Ethan again. Friends and family rallied around them. Daniel's mother stayed with him, making sure he didn't spiral under guilt or anger. But in the quiet moments, Daniel realized something else, something no amount of love or control could fix. The trust he had placed in someone so close had been shattered, and rebuilding it would take more than time. Weeks later, Daniel and Ethan returned to normal life. School routines resumed. Breakfasts were quieter, more cautious, but Daniel learned something crucial. Vigilance and love are not the same thing. Love alone could not protect his son. He had to listen to instincts. He had to watch. he had to trust less blindly. Ethan never forgot the incident. He asked questions, he hesitated, and Daniel answered honestly, not with blame, not with anger, but with careful explanation. Some people don't always do the right thing, buddy, but we always protect ourselves and each other. Always, Daniel said. Ethan nodded. Slowly, he began to smile again. His trust in his father remained stronger than any fear. Months later, the restaurant incident became a distant memory, but Daniel never allowed complacency. He installed extra security at home, reviewed every routine, and always kept a close eye on the people in their lives. He still went to work, still ran his empire, but nothing felt as important as the small hands gripping his at bedtime. Vanessa's trial was public. The press sensationalized it, but Daniel never spoke to reporters. Privacy was paramount. He let the law handle the situation. He let justice unfold. For him, true victory was different. It was seeing Ethan sleep safely at night. It was hearing him laugh. It was feeling his tiny fingers curl around his own. One evening, Daniel stood by Ethan's bedroom window, watching the stars blink above the city. "You know, Dad," Ethan said quietly from the bed, "I think I'll be okay now." Daniel smiled, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Yes, buddy, you will be, because we're together, always." Ethan nodded, eyes heavy but peaceful. Daniel leaned back, letting the weight of relief wash over him. Love, trust, and fear all had collided in a single moment, and yet they had survived, stronger, wiser. And for the first time in a long time, Daniel allowed himself to hope again. Because some battles are not about money, power, or pride. They are about life itself. And the life he had fought to protect was finally safe.